So, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, a very warm welcome to you again on behalf of Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. We're organizing this panel on the role of the Eastern Mediterranean. My name is Harry Dimitris, and I'm a senior fellow with the Global Energy Center. I'm joined on this panel today by Ambassador Berris Ekinci, to my left, Director General for Energy and Environment at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Turkey. Next to her immediately, Erika Olsen, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs of U.S. State Department. Immediately next, Dr. Charles Ellinas, who's also a non-resident senior fellow at the Global Energy Center. Dr. Ellinas was formerly the head of the National Cyprus Hydrocarbons Corporation during times of hope. And then last but not least, to his left, Ariel Ezrahi, also a Global Energy Center senior fellow, former director of energy at the office of the Quartet until, 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much that. This is a discussion, as I say, of trying to bring down general developments in Europe and, of course, the war in Ukraine down to an area that has seen a lot of hype during the last 10 to 12 years after the initial exploration of hydrocarbons in that area. In our discussion today, I'd like to bring in realism and pragmatism because we don't necessarily see that being the case at all times. We'd like to introduce, I think, the sense of urgency simply because things are taking place that we simply never thought of, both positively and negatively, and there is absolutely no time to lose. We'd like to introduce this notion of not taking anything for granted, exactly because things, at least in the last 6 months, have made us rethink everything we thought of until now. But we'd also like perhaps to end on a positive note of when there is a will, there is a way. One of the favorite quotes that I've been using is Andrei Gromyko when he was foreign minister of the Soviet Union and asked how he would describe relations with the West in one word, he said, good. And when asked in 2 words, he said, not good. So I hope we don't replicate this in today's discussion at all. But I would like to connect the dots, taking the lead of what Anna Palacios was saying earlier on today, that we desperately need to connect dots geographically, because what's happening in the West Med affects the East Med and vice versa, and certainly North-South, but also connect dots thematically, because what's happening in one area, say economy or energy, also affects other areas like security, migration, and so on and so forth. And in doing so, I'd like us to do 2 things at the same time. Have a look on the ground, but also go 30,000 feet up and have a helicopter view of the region, of Europe, and even of the world, and see how these developments inform of where we stand in our nitty-gritty issues in the East Med. And then allow me, if I may, to start with Ambassador Ekinci. Ambassador, the war in Ukraine has obviously affected both the energy situation of individual states and the broader energy schemes of Europe. What would you say has been the impact on Turkey? In light of the current situation, that is, how do you evaluate Turkey's immediate and medium-term energy needs and resources? How would you say current developments affect energy supply? And what kind of an effect do they have on existing planning? In particular, if you like, how do they impact transition to renewables?
Thank you very much. Thank you, and I would like also to thank the organizers, for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure to be here. Of course, as you have stated, the war in Ukraine has impacted, the energy sector at a global scale, and it has reminded us the importance of energy supply security and access to energy. When you look to Turkey might have, of course, has a comparative advantage compared to some of the countries in her west. She has been working, we have been working for decades, on the diversification of sources and routes. And so when we look at our installed energy capacity, we can see that renewables are included. About almost 55% of the installed capacity comes from the renewables. Then you have coal, you have natural gas, of course, as very important ingredients. Diversification with regards to routes as well. We do import natural gas from Azerbaijan through pipelines from Azerbaijan, from Russia, as well as from Iran. And of course, LNG as well has come as a very important dimension in our gas imports. And Turkey has been one of the countries which has begun its investments on LNG a couple of years ago. So it has been, of course, very timely. And now, that our import capacity is quite high. We are third in the European market as regards to import capacity after Spain and UK. Of course, one of our advantages as well is that our energy infrastructure is connected to the EU's. And having said that, it seems to us that there is a perception sometimes that with the ongoing crisis that we are, we are less affected than our Western neighbors, which is not true. Turkey as well is very much affected with regards to the current crisis when it comes to the volatility, of the market, the unpredictability, and the tightness of the gas market. We do as well, of course, are very concerned of the coming months of the coming winter. Of course, what can we do? There's no fast-track remedy for that. This is true for everyone. Of course, another component which will be important in the coming years for Turkey is the nuclear. Nuclear will come as well, as a part of the equation. And I believe that in the years to come, nuclear will continue, of course, to be a part of the equation, but maybe mostly through small modular reactors, as it has been discussed previously. And last but not least, of course, the emphasis on renewables. This is, of course, the clean energy as well has been a pillar of our energy supply security for years. And Turkey ranks 5th in Europe and 12th in the world, when it comes to installed capacity in renewables. Our solar energy capacity has reached almost 9 gigawatt, and we are continuing to work on that, as well as we have quite an ambitious policy with regards to wind. And so this is, of course, an aspiration which is in line with our net zero target for 2053 and our fight against climate change.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We'll come back to Turkey's vision for the immediate future, but let me start beaming things up a little bit and turn to Charles, if I may. Charles, my first question to you has two streaks. The European energy transition emerging from the war in Ukraine has refueled debates in the Eastern Mediterranean on the importance of the region for European energy security and its potential for contribution to it. But it reminds me of debates we've had on the subject in the past regarding gas. So is that true? Can you give us a realistic account of where things stand, placing the East Med energy resources in pragmatic parameters, if you like, given the global and European situation?
Well, I will pick you on the first statement you made. By the way, thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Atlantic Council, for getting us here. Perfect occasion to discuss energy in the East Med and everything else that goes around it. Let me pick you up first on the first statement. The EU is passing confusing messages to the East Med. On the one hand, they keep telling us that they need gas, the EU needs gas for the next 10 years to get rid of Russian gas, but beyond that, it fully intends to get rid of natural gas altogether and move into renewables and all of these good things. That, of course, does not support long-term projects. So any projects in the East Med that require more than 5 or 6 years to come together and 20 years life don't fit that. And yet, when we have Ursula von der Leyen coming to the region and telling everybody, we need your gas, full stop, everybody in the region jumps up and says, oh, well, great. I mean, forget about this long-term thing. Ursula said we need the gas, she needs gas from the East Med. Therefore, forget about other plans. Let's concentrate on getting our gas to the East Med, which is not going to happen. So we need clarity of message. So what happens in the East Med energy is influenced by what happens in Europe. And as we approach winter, the global energy crisis is becoming more critical, especially since some forecasters are already telling us that we're going to have a cold winter and a calm winter. Calm winter is not good. That means wind speeds will not be up to scratch, rainfall will be low, and we'll get less wind power, less hydropower, and we'll need gas to make up the difference. It has shifted from a situation requiring urgent attention to one that is becoming systemic and is getting more likely to push the EU into recession. This winter is becoming a matter of survival. So even Ursula von der Leyen admitted that Europe faces difficult times that will not end soon. And many of my fellow analysts expect next year to be even worse than what we have experienced so far. The effects on natural gas and electricity prices in Europe are dramatic. And even though prices have come down now, they are still, I mean, if you take gas, it's still about 8 times more expensive than it was pre-COVID, 2019. These prices are too high. They affect the economy, food, industry, inflation, and high interest rates, and everything else that goes with it. They must come down. It's not possible for European industry to survive for long with these prices. This Med is not immune to that, and yet it has the potential and must find its own solutions. It has abundant renewables and natural gas resources, and these offer an opportunity to develop robust solutions tailor-made to the region. With the EU accelerating transition to green energy and hydrogen, the future of energy in the East Med lies in a new strategy based on growth of renewables, combined with energy storage, combined with upgrading our grids because they're outdated, electricity becoming the center of everything, electricity interconnectors, and using our gas regionally, not looking for export markets. That's why I said we need clarity of message. Using this gas regionally in support of renewables during transition. Regional cooperation is essential to achieve that. The region is too small. The countries are too small. Each one is too small, leaving Turkey aside. Regional cooperation is essential. Egypt already aims for renewables, including green hydrogen, to make up 42% of its energy mix by 2035. And it has taken the lead in spearheading green hydrogen developments. It is well on the road to develop a green hydrogen industry with plans for over $40 billion worth of inward investment, focusing on exports to Europe. The energy crisis has also created a renewed interest in renewables in all other countries of the region. So that we need to work on. With energy problems and high prices expected to be there in the longer term, the East Med region urgently needs to implement appropriate and effective solutions. As a minimum, a rapid transition to renewables to provide more than 50% of electricity by 2030. And it's doable. Greece is doing it. The rest of us can do it as well. This Med is also prolific in natural gas resources. Between Cyprus and Israel, there is something like 600 to 700 billion cubic meters of gas looking for markets. And in Israel, Chevron is talking about exports still to Asian markets, though. But all of the other options to develop this gas are greenfield, and they need 5 to 7 years from start to delivering this gas to the markets. That's too long to supply Europe if the European target is between now and 2030. So that's not going to happen. And it is therefore unlikely that all of this gas can be exported. It can be and should be used regionally to support this energy transition. A shift to renewables and green hydrogen production has the potential to also change the geopolitics of energy in the East Med. But this requires cooperation. Solution of East Med problems, and we have plenty of those, and I don't want to talk about them, will eventually come through dialogue and cooperation, and not confrontation. One way or another, that is going to happen. And I'm hopeful that once elections in the region are completed, and most of the countries in the region have elections by the middle of next year, there will be renewed interest to go back to this dialogue and cooperation. Lebanon and Israel are close to reaching agreement on their long-standing EZ border dispute, showing the way. But I'll leave Ariel to tell us all about that.
Which he will right now, because I'm going to stop you, Charles, right there, if I
I just want to say
Yeah.
one last thing. The coming COP27 meeting in Egypt offers a golden opportunity for the countries of the region to exhibit the ambition required to put together an energy transition fit for the region, based on renewables supported by natural gas.
That's a perfect pass. Thank you so much to Ariel. And Ariel, I'd be very keen if you commented on collaboration. Now, both in general, but also in certain cases in this part of the world, in particular, maximization of energy benefits comes from collaboration between states. Can I ask you to comment on the importance of cross-border cooperation in energy, both green energy and gas as transition in the MENA region, and especially in the light of climate change, please?
Thank you, and thank you to my colleagues at the Atlantic Council and the EBRD for organizing this wonderful event, and it's always great to be back in Istanbul. You know, in the region, in the Middle East, I'll speak more about the Middle East, maybe less East Med in this context. We're used to looking at Europe as the model for many things. The European Union and Europe, including when it comes to energy and the cooperation in energy. And yet, despite that, we're seeing now with Ukraine, with the horrible crisis in Ukraine, we're seeing even the limits of that cooperation. And yet, the Middle East is still lagging behind when it comes. We still can look to Europe for examples of how things can get done. But we also need to learn from the mistakes. Security of supply has been a big theme that was discussed today, and that is something that we need to take to heart very seriously. I would say that the European addiction to Russian gas has become, the Russian affliction for Europe, and obviously we don't want to see that in the Middle East. The issue is that climate change and energy cooperation doesn't know borders. It doesn't distinguish between Shiites, Sunni, Jews, Christians, and yet in the Middle East, nationalism and national movements are abundant. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges that we face. Now, we see that there are some elements of cooperation. The GCC has electricity grid connectivity. There's advancements in that domain. There's the, several years ago formed the EMGF, which includes the Israelis and the Palestinians, as well as other players. And I think that's a very important message. There's the Arab gas pipeline, etc. But a lot of these initiatives still need a lot of work, and we still have a long way to go. what I've been dealing with the last several years, the energy, provision of energy for the Palestinians in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As most of you know, the Israelis and Palestinians do not have a peace agreement, and they seem to be quite far from that. In fact, we don't even see a process underway at the moment in that regard, unfortunately. And yet, even these two peoples have found ways to cooperate on energy, including during conflict. I was taken very much by what was said earlier today by Olga Belkova about the Ukrainian engineers who were fixing the infrastructure under fire. Well, the same thing happened also in the context of the Gaza conflict as well, where you had Palestinian and Israeli engineers. It's often the engineers, not the politicians, by the way, who are risking their lives to fix infrastructure so we can all have electricity at home. But it shows the importance of solving these energy issues even in times of conflict. And my friend Charles was just talking about the Lebanese, the impending Lebanese agreement that we hope, Lebanese-Israeli agreement, we hope will come to fruition. This is not out of friendship between Lebanon and Israel. This is out of necessity, and we sincerely hope that it and I know you share the view, and we've talked about this, that this will get signed. There's a chance that it will happen before the Israeli election, but if it doesn't, then I fear that that it may not happen, and that would be unfortunate indeed. I think I'll stop there, but happy to come back to
But we'll come back to this. Yes,
Yes.
of course. Then, Erica, if I might turn to you. The discussion we have now is one that goes back and forth between politics and the industry, between economy and geopolitics. So obviously politics, geopolitics, and energy are inextricably interconnected, especially in this part of the world. But energy can both exacerbate existing conflicts, but also, of course, has the power to act as a catalyst for the solution of such disputes through mutual gains. But this requires two things. It requires vision and it requires leadership. And so if I could kindly ask you to comment on how could constructive thinking and engagement through US leadership in the region unlock the energy potential, at the same time tackling some of the rooted conflicts. I'm very glad that Ambassador Payet is here. Amos Hochstein has been super involved, Tori Newland, Amanda Slow, John Koenig, a number of people have devoted good years in trying to get this on. So I'd be grateful for your first comments on this.
Absolutely, thank you. And I'm really happy to be here today and to see so many friends and colleagues in the audience. As many of you know, I served as economic counselor for the United States here in Turkey from 2016 to 2019 and worked a lot on this very question. I think right now, as has been put so well throughout this day of excellent discussions put together by the Atlantic Council and EBRD, we are really at a tipping point when it comes to this discussion of energy security and the future of energy in the region. And to use maybe an American idiom, I think we very much can walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to be looking at how do we address today's crisis, but how do we not lose sight of where we want to be in 30 years? And I think this comes to your question. And I look back in history a little bit again, to many people in this room, about the vision for the Southern Gas Corridor. I mean, when we think about SCP, BTC, now TANP and TAP, and where the vision that took, and the new structures that took to create, has given us today a mechanism to get energy out of the Caspian that we wouldn't have had. And imagine what the situation would look like without it. So I think right now, as I think about what we need to focus on to create that resilience that we're all looking for in the long term, I think it's a combination of conservation, diversification, interconnection, innovation, and then, as someone said this morning, really important acceleration in all of this. You talked about Amos, and I appreciate Ariel's comments. We are working very hard when it comes to the Lebanon-Israeli discussions. I think that's a perfect example of how pragmatism and the ability to work together can come to solutions that are going to benefit the region as a whole. And I think there's a lot of potential for that. I think as Charles put very well, this is a small region, and without each other, you end up with a lot of very interesting stranded assets, and that's not in any of our interests. So how can we help build up that cooperation and that coordination in what is, as you noted, a very challenging region? And that's something that I think we are looking and working hard to do. I think this question of interconnectivity, particularly when it comes to grids, as Charles mentioned, and the ability to create the resilience of the grids that we're all going to need as we bring on online green energy and additional renewables, is something we all should be working together to do now. And I think that's something that particularly in the East Med context, you can't leave anyone out of that conversation. I think that everyone in the region needs to be looking at how you build those interconnectors and how we look to the future to do that, while at the same time trying to address the very urgent need that we have now when it comes to gas.
Can I stay on the subject a little bit with you, and I wonder if you could kindly give a few thoughts on, as I said, we can't take things for granted, and one of the things we cannot take for granted is that at the moment we need to strike a balance between the present and future of fossil fuels on the one hand and transition to renewables. So I was wondering if you could say a couple of words more, where exactly do we stand now in the sense of what is the essence and timeline, if you like, of this transition that is responding to an urgent situation that we have now, but without undermining the future. Where can we draw the line between a healthy combination, if you like, between fossils and renewable sources?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important question, particularly because we know the need is urgent now. So focusing on developing particularly gas that's going to come online in 15 or 20 years isn't going to solve the crisis that we're currently confronting. So I think there needs to be a focus on projects that can be brought online quickly, projects that can be brought online together, and then at the same time looking at these broader infrastructure pieces that set us up for the long term. And you know, as I think we've talked about throughout the day today, and there was a great mention, I think, of Egypt and some of the things that are being done in North Africa, thinking about whether it's hydrogen development or other types of clean energy. How can we take that and really replicate it across the region is the question. And I don't think the real issue, of course, is going to be resources when it comes to those kind of investments. But I think we have to, when you ask about the time frame, I think we have to be focused right now on what we can bring to market quickly, while at the same time setting us up for that transition. Because without that, I think the green transition has two really important and equally essential elements. One is, of course, the longer-term challenge to all of us when it comes to climate change. And the Eastern Med, it confronts this to such a significant degree, as we've all seen, with the forest fires that the countries of the region have confronted. But then also, how we're able to work with the countries to have a shared vision for what that looks like. And I think we all know, and you mentioned elections in the region, which always bring challenges, but I think it's really in the interest of all of the countries of the region to find out how to do that, and that's something that we stand ready to assist in any way we can.
Thank you very much for this. And speaking of which, let me come to Berris and ask exactly this from Turkey's point of view. That is, the future of energy in the region seems to be eventually the local and regional use of the gas reserves, electricity, interconnectivity. How do you see Turkey's place and potential contribution and benefits from such regional arrangements? Would the politics have to be in place first, or would energy win-win prospects prompt developments and cause the politics to follow?
Thank you very much. If I may just go back
Please.
for a couple of seconds, I mean, to BTC and Baku Tbilisi's room that you have mentioned, and I think that it can just, shed a light for today as well and for the region, because at that time there was a very strong and shared vision, and as well as very strong commitment, I mean, from the states involved, a close partnership and dialogue, and between the US, Turkey, and as well as the regional countries. I don't know whether, I mean, he's still in the room, but I remember with Matt Bryza in Baku in 2000, when we were sitting at the same table with our Georgian and Azeri colleagues, I mean, trying to encourage them, I mean, to reach the final decisions with regard to BTC. And really, I also believe that BTC has been an historic success, but it was thanks to that dialogue and partnership which existed. And unfortunately, today, even, I mean, within this crisis period, we don't see yet, I mean, this solidarity or that partnership among the countries. For instance, I mean, in our case, I mean, with the EU as well. I mean, when you look, I mean, to the interconnection which exists with regards to the gas infrastructure or electricity infrastructure between Turkey and the EU countries, but still, in this time of crisis, we don't have the necessary, we still don't see the necessary dialogue that we should be maintaining, I mean, with the European Commission. So this is, of course, very important. And when it comes to the region, I mean, we deem energy as a field of cooperation, I mean, in the region as well. And this has become all the more important with the latest developments. And without a proper setup and concrete as well as realistic goals to be discussed, I mean, among partners, I'm afraid that the success that we are looking for or we are striving for will be doomed. And one should not forget that for the capacity, I mean, to be created, to be increased, investments constitute a prerequisite. And this morning also it has been discussed that we have to take the decisions now, and maybe we should have taken them yesterday. And consequently, the companies should be encouraged, I mean, and assured in relation to market dynamics. And all in this room, I believe, know much better the road which lead to final investment decisions. And there's a huge potential in our region for the development of renewable energy, and in particular, solar energy, solar power. And we concur that this could be a crucial area for cooperation. And consequently, the next step could be the strengthening of electricity connectivity to utilize the benefits of solar power in the region. And, but for this, all countries in the region should leave aside political motivation, as it has been stated, and act strategically. In other words, rationality should prevail over emotions. And we expect dialogue and coordination with Turkey on energy issues, as I had stated. And energy connectivity projects should be inclusive, feasible in terms of technicality and commerciality, and contribute to regional cooperation. For instance, the electricity interconnector project between Turkey and the island of Cyprus is such a project, and technically and commercially much more viable than some others. And one should not forget that the Turkish electricity grid is already connected to the European one. So this project could be extended to the region and could contribute to enabling the sharing of renewables among countries and giving access to cleaner and secure energy for consumers. So we'll be facing a win-win case. I would like also to take this opportunity to underline that the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus had conveyed a set of proposals, to the UN Secretary General beginning July, one of them being the formation of a joint committee on the island to pursue studies on the maximum benefit of solar energy. So as gas as well is taken into account as a transition source, we should as well focus on feasible and viable gas projects in the East Med region. And the current circumstances can be challenging, but as it has already been said as well at some point, sometimes, challenges come hand in hand with opportunities. So I believe that we could work on that, and some energy policies or energy projects could create some the conditions necessary for a political solution at the end. And so we already have the infrastructure, the Southern Gas Corridor, which is also designed to be fourth artery carrying gas to Europe. It's a critical infrastructure for European Union. It's energy security. TANAP constitutes its backbone, and it can be bolstered with additional gas capacities coming from the Caspian or from EastMed. And as a matter of fact, we were just reading yesterday that the energy ministers of Azerbaijan and Turkey have declared a strong political will to double the capacity of TANAP. So this is also another project that we should all be working together. But again, without cooperation, without solidarity among the partners, it will be very difficult to achieve whatever we are aiming at.
Exactly, and thank you for bringing these issues up, because I don't think that it is very well known, at least in Greece, perhaps in Turkey, the same, that there is interconnection, electrical interconnection between Turkey and Greece. This is a very positive step, and notwithstanding the rest of the problems, it operates greatly. Thank you also for bringing up the issue of solar and wind in the broader Middle East region, because that really is where the value added of this region lies regarding Europe, simply because there's a lot of wind, there's a lot of solar, and there's a lot of space for the deployment of renewable sources. On rationality over sentiments, Kolaios, and I don't know, in this part of the world, we'll see. But there are positive developments. There are positive examples, and I'd like to go back exactly to what Ariel was saying, building also on what Eric and Berris was saying. So the recent negotiations, for instance, on the maritime border between Israel and Lebanon, fingers crossed on how it will go, because obviously it's ups and downs. The Israel-Jordan Water Cooperation, that is the talks on that, as well as the opportunities afforded by the Abraham Accords for regional cooperation, I think are key examples of vision, of pragmatism, of the realization that the world is simply changing, and we can't go about with our old way of thinking, and that the future lies largely in cooperation. Can I ask you, Ariel, for a comment on Israel's thinking behind this experience, and how this could be a positive example for others?
Yeah, I can only assume Israel's thinking. I don't speak for Israel, obviously, but I can assume. I'll pick up on a few points that was raised. First of all, I have to say I sign on every word that Berris just said before me. Uncoordinated and complete agreement with everything you said. Several things. One thing that I think is interesting, that we're seeing that actually in the sphere of natural gas, and as was also said by Erica, this is important as a transitional fuel, obviously. And let's keep our eyes on the ball on that. Let's not support projects that are going to come online in 30 years or whatever, 20 years. We've actually seen that there's been decent cooperation in the MENA region in that regard. Again, going back to the Israeli-Palestinian example, including in this instance, whether it's the Gas for Gaza project that I've been working on for the last few years, the Office of the Quartet, whether it's to the West Bank, whether it's Israel and Jordan, the examples that were given, and indeed Israel and Egypt, and now the Lebanese-Israeli maritime agreement that we hope will be signed imminently, again opens the door for additional cooperation. That's for, again, in natural gas as a transitional solution. But as was said by you, Harry, we have yet to see that level of advancement and progress and cooperation when it comes to renewable energy in the region. We need to see much more of that. If I go again back to the Palestinians, in the West Bank, the World Bank estimated that there's some 3,000 megawatts of installed capacity that could be installed in the West Bank. and yet the parties are still not able to agree on that. Again, climate change doesn't really care about whether you're Israeli or Palestinian or whether you're in Area C or Area A or B. And so the parties simply have to find a way to overcome this. We've seen some things that have come up also, again, in the context of the Abraham Accords, such as the Project Prosperity that looks at cooperation between Israel and Jordan with private sector from the United Arab Emirates, which is very interesting. But I think it'd be nice to see, in fact, not nice to see, it's essential to see more cooperation cross-border in the renewable energy space, whether it's hydrogen from Egypt, green hydrogen from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, whether it's energy tech coming out of, renewable energy tech coming out of Israel, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to see more of this. As you mentioned, Harry, there are some political developments, regional political developments that could facilitate this. But as was said earlier, I think by Erica, it's really important to keep all this relevant stakeholders under the tent, because without that, you'll either have spoilers or you won't really reach the maximum that you really need in order for us to succeed. And we have an uphill struggle in all of these issues.
Absolutely, but when there is a will, there is a way.
100%.
So obviously that, and I hope that this serves as a good example for others. For instance, it would be very difficult to explain to the international community how the two sides on Cyprus decline as a matter of principle to discuss energy when Israel is talking to Lebanon. More importantly, Lebanon is talking to Israel on this, irrespective of the agreement in the end. So hopefully that could be a beacon. But speaking about cooperation and the facilitation, Charles, can I turn to you to ask specifically if you could comment, how would you think that the EU and the US could help the East Med countries achieve regional energy resilience and security?
I think the key element is clarity of message. The message coming from, especially from the European Union, is confusing. So when, as I said before, when Ursula von der Leyen came to the region, she signed an MOU with Egypt and Israel, which expires at 2030, supporting this view in the European Union that beyond 2030 we don't need new gas. And yet, when she visited Israel, she said, we need more gas from Israel, without qualifying what she meant by that. And immediately, the news media in Israel, in Cyprus, went all over the place saying that Europe wants more gas, so let's go and develop our gas fields to send to Europe. Of course, the oil companies are not doing that because they want a clear message. They're not going to invest billions. At the same time, only last week, I believe, a German minister was talking about the East Med gas pipeline. And when, while Amos Hochstein put it to bed not that long ago by saying that the East Med gas pipeline is no longer needed, not justifiable, and he stopped for a while, he stopped all of the discussion about this blasted pipeline that has been coming in and out of the region like a phoenix. And yet it resurfaced again this week. This week in Cyprus, they say, forget about what Charles Ellinas is saying. Germans want the East Med gas pipeline. Therefore, it's going to happen. All this lack of clarity takes away from the region, because the countries of the region, years ago, especially in Cyprus, were promised riches out of developing this gas. And every time they hear Europe saying anything remotely feeding this idea that Europe is going to take the gas and pay billions of dollars for it, it detracts from discussing what to do in the region, what to do to develop everything in the region. Coming out of this period of the pandemic and now the crisis in the Ukraine, the economies of the region are in dire straits, not just here in Turkey, but also in all the other countries of the region. I mean, Greece just recently committed, 5% of its GDP to subsidize prices for industry and and people, and it's 5% that it doesn't have. It's borrowed money. Eventually, that has to be paid. So the countries of the region need to really find ways to cooperate and to develop their future energy based on cooperation. There are already the beginnings of it. There is also, only now, the interconnector between that eventually will link Israel to Cyprus to Europe is starting, but we will need interconnectors everywhere to join all of the countries of the region. That requires a lot of investment, but that isn't going to come if our people continuously believe that our gas is going to find its way to Europe. So if when Amos Hochstein came and tried to kill the Eastern pipeline, but the Germans now brought it back again, that was a clear message and it helped. We need more clear messages from Europe and from the United States. And Harry, we went together to Brussels to pass that message that please don't allow people to come to the region giving hope that the gas of the region will go to Europe. It will not go to Europe. Stop that, kill that, and allow people to find other ways to deal with that. And if the oil companies don't want to work with that, because most of them aspire to exports, let's do it in a different way. But we need clarity of message. That's exactly what I'm asking for.
Thank you, Noah. This is something that certainly we've been trying to push along as a message alongside sometimes the frustration from the confused way that we see the EU dealing with matters, the quick fixes that sometimes undermine longer-term solutions, the fact that unfortunately in this part of the world, anything coming out of the EU acquires immediately a metaphysical quality to it, and obviously the disconnect that sometimes exists between various people within the EU institutions, but then again, that might be frustration. But what we said in a previous meeting that cooperation is like cholesterol. You can have good cooperation and bad cooperation. So if cooperation is designed to promote common collaborative systems, it's fine. But if it's either designed or ends up in being exclusionary, like for the time being the East Med Gas Forum, for instance, then I think its potential for being long-lived is rather curtailed. I know that to beat our own drum, Charles and I have been proposing this idea of changing the East Med Gas Forum to an East Med Energy Forum, a much more inclusive system, which is not only conducive to developments with renewables, but also would allow Turkey to become now part, leaving back the baggage of the past. I'll come back to the panel, but meanwhile, the floor is open for any questions. If you have so, the microphone is going around. Please raise your hand, if I may, ask you to do so, and then indicate also your name and affiliation. Please do so as we speak, if you wish. But what I've been taking away from our discussion so far is that the future of energy in the region seems to be electrification, interconnectedness, and renewable sources that have a great difference to fossil fuels. They're not commodities. It's not something that states can/have to fight over. The value added of renewables lie exactly in the connectivity if and when need and interest be. And so in a sense, I think the further value added of this is that if we go back to fossil fuels, then we also go back to conflict, whereas the more we focus on renewables, the more chances we have also to minimize that. I think that energy transformation, expansion and renewable energies and greater interconnectivity would lead to opportunities for cooperation, and these opportunities for cooperation will advance energy cooperation, economic perspectives, and incentives also for political cooperation. Eventually, I also take away that the creation of interdependencies might lie at the heart of things, if you like, confidence building measures, call it linkages, whatever you like. The example I have in mind is also from the 10 very, very good years of rapprochement between Turkey and Greece in 1999, to 2010. I think for Turkish speakers now we go from rapprochement to rapprochement. There is none. Hopefully we'll go back to a more positive agenda. But I think we need to go, as I say, up and look at the region in a more concerted way. I'll pose a very quick question to each of you, and I'd appreciate a very short answer. What keeps you up at night regarding energy in the broader region and developments? Berris Hanım, I'll start with you.
Electricity, sustainable electricity,
Okay.
of course, these days, and also.
Well, without it, you can have a better sleep, of course, but yeah.
Well, yes,
Just
still,
yeah.
and also looking forward for the heating to continue.
There we go.
Cold, calm winter, someone said. And then politics trumping pragmatism when it comes to energy development.
It's this false hope that they keep feeding people in my region. It's this false hope that the riches are going to come out of selling this gas. And we need to dispel it. If we dispel it and people direct their energies into something more constructive and start looking how to benefit regionally from renewables in combination and support with gas supporting them, then we can go somewhere. But at the moment, it's desperate. Every time I see headlines about exports, my hair stands.
I guess what keeps me up at night is the concern that my two children will inherit a world which is far worse than the one that I was born into, which was bad enough in many ways. There's also good things, right, about our planet, but both in terms of conflict and also very much so in terms of climate change. We don't have the luxury of planning and hoping that in 20, 30 years things, this is happening right now, despite the fact that there are still some deniers out there. This is a bipartisan issue. This is not Democrats, Republicans, or anything like that. This is happening before our eyes. So that's what keeps me up at night. And I hope that our politicians have the foresight to see that. But I do also take encouragement from the private sector, because the private sector does realize this. And maybe if the politicians are not listening, then they'll look at what's happening with the private sector and with their constituents. And eventually they'll see the light as well.
Thank you for that. What kept me up last night was the agony of not finishing on time, which I think we will now. I'd like to ask you all to give a big hand to our panelists. Thank you very much for helping us conceptualize a pragmatic, sustainable vision for a broader energy mix in the region. Thank you very much all for staying.
Thank you, Ariel.
Thank you.
I need to announce that you need to stay on, because I would certainly. It's followed by the last panel of the day, the keynote remarks by Mary Bruce Warlick, and I certainly look forward to that. Thank you again.